morning. It's Thursday, August 17th. And 2 days ago, on August 15th, was the second anniversary of one of the most disastrous days in American history. Because that's the second anniversary of us trying to leave Afghanistan after 20 years of unsuccessfully trying to gain control of that country. And we had to leave in a wild, wild escape. People running to try and get into airplanes and everything while we were trying to remove our troops. And there was a group that was trapped there and killed, The Taliban took control of Kabul and declared victory on August 15th. 2021. And the NATO-backed Islamic Republic of Afghanistan collapsed. And the Taliban controlled the whole city except the Hamid Karzai International Airport. And that's how American troops and others were trying to escape, by jumping on those planes. And there were horrible pictures of people running after the planes as they took off down the runways. So all in all, one of the major disasters in American history took place 2 years ago. But I have to say, the one thing that went on at the end there was the successful evacuation of over 122,000 people. And the evacuation was completed on August 30th, 1 day before the deadline that was agreed upon with the Taliban. Now, that deadline had changed many different times. Trump had originally expressed leaving Afghanistan in May, but then it got pushed off to September and October, and finally they agreed upon August 31st, 2021. I think as you look back on this, the U.S. was lucky to get that many people out in such a fast time, because panic had spread through the civilian population as the Taliban seized the capital. And many citizens were rushing to the airport, and many others were running to their home, and many others were running to places where NATO had some control. And the president of the country, Ashraf Ghani, flew out as fast as he could, even though he had stood up bravely and said, I'm staying to the bitter end. They're not getting rid of me. But as soon as the Taliban entered the city, he took off. And I don't remember where he ended up, someplace in Switzerland or something like that. He left the country in a difficult situation. But he knew, he was smart enough to recognize the fact that he wasn't going to be able to reconcile anything with the Taliban. So he ran for his life, while all the time he had kept on saying, don't worry about me, I'm going to stick here to the end, I'm going to defend my people, and blah, blah, blah. But it turned out to be a major act of cowardice at the end. And now here we are 2 years later. And while at the beginning of their takeover, the Taliban didn't do anything right away with the women were going to school at that point in time, past the 6th grade. But they're not going to school past the 6th grade now, because it didn't take long for the Taliban to decide that women had no place in society and that they weren't getting educated anytime soon, even though they pretend to the rest of the world that they intend to allow their women to get educated. But meanwhile, on this day, 2 days ago actually, the second anniversary of them taking over the country, they had major parties and major events going on, and no women were allowed to participate in those events. The women were shut out. So we have the women now worse than second-class citizens, trapped in a country where they can't get an education, where they have no chance to leave the country. But I give a lot of them credit, because they have had several quiet demonstrations where they've held up some placards and said, free us, let us go to school. But that hasn't happened. So if you look at the lives of the women of Afghanistan, they are kept out of the classrooms. They are kept out of most jobs. They are kept out of most of public life. They are an isolated group, kept in the closet, so to speak. even though the Taliban pretend at some point in time that they are going to change their views on women. But they won't do that because every time they ask the question, they declare it's in the Sharia. The Sharia says X, Y, and Z, and that's why women are treated the way they are. So while men rode through the city on bicycles and motorcycles and cars and were waving flags and celebrating the second anniversary, the women were nowhere to be seen. Now, Sharia is based on Islamic canonical law, based on the teachings of the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet. And it covers both religious and secular duties, and sometimes contains penalties for lawbreak. And it has been generally supplemented by legislation adopted to the conditions of the day. And so right now they're using these conditions to keep the women out of sight. An interesting fact about Sharia is that a woman has the right to choose a husband. So they use Sharia as something of a guide on the way they're going to operate. But they are not truly abiding by what the Sharia says. That under the Sharia, that women wouldn't choose certain men to be their husband. And the other thing is, under Sharia, it allows a man to have 4 wives. Does that mean that 4 different women chose the same guy? I find that hard to believe. So I believe that the treatment of women is something that the men of Islam have decided for themselves, because there's no clear definition of how they're supposed to treat women in the Sharia. There's nothing in there that says women should not be educated and women should not do this and women should not do that. The men have created this atmosphere, and I don't know how far back it goes. But using Sharia as an excuse is nothing more than an excuse. It's some way to keep control, to make women slaves. It's a disgrace. And here's the amazing thing. Sharia is not a written document. Sharia is a belief that contains many, many misconceptions, because based upon beliefs that change by the individual thought process. It's not a written document. It's not a Bible. It's a load of crap. So I leave you with that this morning. The abuse of women, 2 years after a great loss in the United States history. Somewhere we shouldn't have been for 20 years and we got nothing out of it. And when we look at the situation there now, we should feel very ashamed. Have a great day. Adios.